They call her Luna. They call her traitor. They call her the woman who tried to poison an entire kingdom. But here's what they don't tell you. The wolves who condemned her never gave her a trial. They never let her speak. They just dragged her down into the earth and let the mountain swallow her whole. Tonight, you're going to witness what happens when the broken queen they buried comes crawling back up from hell. You're going to see every alpha who ever bowed to power learn what real terror looks like. So stick around until the very end of this story, hit that like button, and drop your city in the comments so I know my tribe is watching. Because what Celine Ravenwood is about to do to the wolves who betrayed her, that's the kind of revenge legends are made of. The chains were too tight. That was the first thing Celine noticed when consciousness dragged her back into the waking world. Not the blood crusted across her temple, not the way her ribs screamed with every shallow breath, just the iron biting into her wrists so deep she could feel the bone underneath. The stone floor beneath her was cold enough to leach the warmth from her skin. Somewhere in the darkness, water dripped in steady rhythm, like a countdown to something she couldn't name. She tried to open her eyes, but one of them wouldn't cooperate. Swollen shut. She remembered the fist that had done it, remembered the face attached to that fist. Kael, her mate, her alpha. The man who had stood before the council 3 days ago and called her a traitor in front of every pack leader in the kingdom. The memory hit her like a second beating. The grand hall with its massive timber beams and torches that cast shadows tall as giants. Hundreds of wolves watching as Kael held up a vial of nightshade extract and declared it had been found in her chambers. His voice hadn't even shaken when he spoke the words. When he demanded her execution for attempting to poison the Alpha bloodline, she had opened her mouth to scream the truth, that the vial had been planted, that someone was framing her. But before a single word could leave her throat, 3 guards had seized her arms, and Kael had turned his back, just turned away like she was already dead. The council hadn't deliberated, hadn't questioned. They'd simply nodded, and the sentence was passed. Not death, something worse. Imprisonment in the forgotten depths beneath Black Hollow Mountain where traitors went to rot until memory itself gave up on them. Celine forced her working eye open. Blackness pressed in from all sides, but far above she could make out a sliver of gray, a crack in the stone ceiling where faint light filtered down. Not daylight. Something dimmer. Moonlight, maybe. Or just the ghost of it. How long had she been down here? Hours? Days? Her tongue was stuck to the roof of her mouth. She tried to swallow and tasted copper. Blood. Her own or someone else's, she couldn't tell anymore. A sound echoed through the dark. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Heavy boots on stone. She didn't bother trying to stand. The chains were bolted to the wall and she'd already tested their strength when they'd first thrown her in here. Her shoulders were still burning from that attempt. 3 figures emerged from the tunnel entrance. Torchlight spilled across the floor, turning the pooled water into molten gold. The lead guard was a massive wolf named Garrett, who had served under Kael for a decade. Behind him came 2 younger soldiers she didn't recognize. Their faces were hard, trained to show nothing. Garrett stopped 5 feet away and looked down at her. His expression was carved from the same stone as the walls. "You still breathing, Luna?" His voice carried no warmth, no hint of the respect he'd once shown her when she walked the palace halls as Kael's chosen mate. Celine didn't answer. What was there to say? Garrett crouched down. The torch in his hand made his shadow stretch across the ceiling like a demon twice his size. "Alpha wants to know if you're ready to confess." She almost laughed. The sound came out as a rasp that hurt her throat. "Confess to what?" she managed. Her voice was wrecked. 3 days of screaming her innocence followed by 2 days of silence had shredded it to nothing. To poisoning the bloodline. Garrett's tone didn't change. To plotting against the throne. To betraying your mate and your pack. "I didn't do any of that." The guard behind Garrett shifted his weight. His hand rested on the pommel of his blade. Garrett stood. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Something that might have been doubt or might have been disgust. Then it was gone. "Then you're going to die down here." He turned to leave, but Celine's voice cut through the dark. "Why?" Garrett paused. Didn't look back. "Why what? Why won't anyone listen? Why won't anyone question it? I've been loyal to this pack since I was 16 years old. I've bled for it, fought for it. And Kael just, your alpha made his judgment." Garrett's words were flat, final. The council agreed. That's all that matters. He walked away. The other two guards followed. The torchlight retreated down the tunnel and darkness swallowed everything again. Celine let her head fall back against the stone. Something inside her chest was breaking. Not her ribs this time. Something deeper. The part of her that had believed in justice, in truth, in the mate bond that was supposed to be unbreakable. Cale had severed it without hesitation. She closed her eyes and tried to find sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop moving. It kept circling back to the same question. Who did this? Someone had planted that vial. Someone had whispered in Kael's ear until he believed his own mate was capable of treason. Someone wanted her buried alive while they walked free. But who? The answer wouldn't come. Just more questions. More darkness pressing in until she couldn't tell where her body ended and the void began. Time lost meaning. She drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she dreamed. Other times the dreams and waking blurred together until she couldn't tell which was real. In one dream, she saw her mother standing in a field of silver grass. Her mother had died when Celine was 12, but in the dream, she looked exactly as Celine remembered. Dark hair, eyes like smoke, a smile that made you feel safe even when the world was falling apart. Her mother's lips moved, but no sound came out. Celine tried to run toward her, but her legs wouldn't work. The chains held her back. Then her mother's face changed. The smile twisted into something cruel. Something that didn't belong to the woman who had sung Celine to sleep every night before the fever took her. You were always weak, her mother said, and now you're going to die weak. Celine woke gasping. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Sweat slicked her skin despite the cold. Just a dream, just her mind eating itself. She forced herself to breathe. In and out, slow and steady, the way her father had taught her when she was a child afraid of storms. Her father. He'd been beta to the previous alpha, a warrior respected by every wolf in the kingdom. He'd raised her to be strong, to never bow, to fight even when the odds were impossible. What would he think if he could see her now? Chained in the dark, abandoned by her mate, condemned by the wolves she'd sworn to protect. Shame burned hotter than the pain. She pulled against the chains again, not because she thought they'd break, just because she needed to feel something other than helplessness. The iron bit deeper. Fresh blood ran down her wrists. "Celine," a voice whispered. She froze. The voice hadn't come from the tunnel. It had come from deeper, from somewhere below. Celine Ravenwood. It was a woman's voice, low and smooth, the kind of voice that could make you do things you'd regret. "Who's there?" Celine's words echoed off the walls. Silence. Then laughter. Soft and cold as winter wind. "You're in the belly of the mountain now, little Luna. Down here, the old laws still hold. Down here, the forgotten things wait." Celine's pulse kicked up. She scanned the darkness but saw nothing. "Show yourself." "Why?" The voice sounded amused. "So you can see the face of your doom, or are you hoping I'm here to save you?" "I don't need saving." The laughter came again, closer this time. "Everyone needs saving, especially wolves who've been thrown away by their own kind." Something moved in the shadows. Not walked, moved, like liquid darkness shifting against the stone. Celine pressed her back against the wall. Her chains rattled. "What are you?" The movement stopped. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then two eyes opened in the black, crimson, glowing faint as embers. "I am what your alphas fear," the voice said. "What they tried to erase from history. What they buried so deep they thought we'd never rise again." The eyes moved closer. Celine could make out a shape now. Tall, lean, human in form but wrong in proportion. Too long in the limbs, too sharp in the angles. "We are the Shadow Wolves." Celine's breath caught. Shadow Wolves were a myth. A story parents told children to make them behave. Ancient predators that walked between worlds. Extinct for 1,000 years. "You're not real," she whispered. The creature laughed. The sound vibrated through Celine's chest. "Tell that to your bones when I tear them from your flesh." But the creature didn't move. It just stood there watching with those burning eyes. "Why haven't you killed me then?" Celine forced the words out. "If you're real, if you're what you say you are, why talk?" The eyes tilted, curious. "Because you're different." "Different how?" The creature stepped closer, close enough now that Celine could see its outline. Humanoid, but covered in something that looked like smoke given shape. Its mouth was too wide. Too many teeth. "You smell like betrayal," it said, "like broken oaths and shattered bonds. You smell like one of us." "I'm not a monster." "No?" The creature leaned in. Its breath was ice. "Then why did they throw you down here to die? Why did your mate turn his back? Why did your pack watch you fall and do nothing?" Celine's jaw clenched. Because they were lied to, or because they wanted to believe the lie. The creature straightened. "People don't condemn the innocent unless they're looking for an excuse. You don't know anything about them. I know everything about them." The creature's voice dropped lower. "I was here when your alphas built this prison. I watched them drag wolves down here for crimes they didn't commit. I've listened to 1,000 condemned souls scream until their voices gave out. This mountain is built on lies, little Luna, and you're just the latest one." Celine wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come, because some part of her knew the creature was right. Kael hadn't fought for her. The council hadn't questioned. The pack had watched her be dragged away, and not a single wolf had stepped forward to defend her. Maybe she had been naive to believe in them. The creature circled her now, slow, deliberate. "So what will you do?" it asked. "Die down here with the rest of the forgotten, or become something that makes them regret ever speaking your name? What are you offering?" The creature stopped. Its crimson eyes locked onto hers. "Power, survival, revenge. And what do you want in return?" "Everything." The word hung in the air between them. Celine's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to spit in the creature's face and die with whatever dignity she had left. But then she thought of Kael standing before the council. She thought of the vial of poison planted in her room. She thought of the guards dragging her through the palace while wolves she'd called friends looked away. She thought of dying in chains without ever knowing who had destroyed her life. "I'm listening," she said. The creature smiled. Its teeth gleamed in the dark. "Good." It moved faster than anything Celine had ever seen. One moment it was 5 feet away. The next, its clawed hand was wrapped around her throat, lifting her off the ground. Celine choked, kicked, but the creature's grip was iron. "First lesson," it hissed. "Power requires sacrifice, and you have nothing left to lose." Its other hand came up, claws extended. They gleamed like black glass. Then it drove them into her chest. Pain exploded through Celine's body. White hot, blinding. She tried to scream, but the creature's hand was crushing her windpipe. Her vision went red, then black, then something else. She saw the mountain, not the prison. The whole mountain, miles of stone and tunnels carved by something that predated wolves. She saw chambers filled with bones, altars stained with ancient blood, and deep at the heart of it all, she saw them. Shadow wolves, hundreds of them, waiting in the dark. They weren't extinct, they'd been hiding, and now they were waking up. The vision shattered. Celine crashed back into her body, gasping. The creature released her, and she collapsed to the floor. Blood poured from the wound in her chest. She could feel her heart struggling, stuttering. This was it. She was dying. But then the blood stopped. The wound began to close. Not healing, changing. Black veins spread from the injury across her skin like roots digging into soil. Celine's scream finally tore free. The creature crouched beside her. It ran one claw along her jawline, almost gently. "Welcome to the kingdom beneath the kingdom," it whispered. "Welcome home, Queen." Celine's vision blurred. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness took her was the creature's smile, and beyond it, in the deeper darkness, hundreds of crimson eyes opening one by one. When she woke again, everything was different. The chains were gone. The cell was gone. She was lying on smooth stone in a massive chamber, lit by some kind of bioluminescent fungus growing across the ceiling. It cast everything in pale blue light. She sat up. Her body moved without pain. The wound in her chest was gone. Not even a scar remained, but her hands. Celine held them up. Her fingers ended in claws now, razor sharp, black as obsidian. "What did you do to me?" She spun. The creature from before stood near the chamber entrance. In the better light, Celine could see it more clearly. Female. Tall and lean, with features that were almost beautiful if you ignored the wrongness underneath. "I didn't do anything," the creature said. I just unlocked what was already sleeping inside you. I'm not a shadow wolf. No, not yet. The creature walked closer. But you will be, or you'll die. Those are your only options now, little Luna. Celine's claws dug into her palms. She wanted to rage, to demand answers, but she was too tired, too broken. Why me? She asked instead. The creature studied her for a long moment. Because your bloodline is older than you know. Because your mother wasn't the simple pack wolf history remembers. Because the same blood that runs in your veins ran in the veins of the first Shadow Queen 1,000 years ago. That's impossible. Is it? The creature's smile was sharp. Or did the alphas just erase that truth along with everything else they feared? Celine wanted to call it a lie. But she thought of her mother, the way other wolves had looked at her sometimes, the way she died so suddenly from a fever no healer could cure. What if it hadn't been a fever at all? The creature must have seen something shift in Celine's expression because it nodded. You're starting to understand. Good. Understanding is the first step. Survival is the second. And the third? The creature's smile widened. Revenge. Before Celine could respond, the chamber floor trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere deep in the mountains, something roared. It was a sound that made Celine's bones vibrate. A sound that belonged to something massive and ancient and very, very angry. The creature didn't flinch. That, it said calmly, is your first trial. My what? If you want to command the shadow wolves, you have to prove you're worthy. The creature gestured toward a tunnel at the far end of the chamber. Down there waits something that's been sleeping for centuries. Something that will either recognize you as its queen or tear you into pieces small enough to fit through its teeth. Celine stared at the tunnel. The roar came again, closer. And if I refuse, then you die here. And the wolves who betrayed you live long, happy lives, never knowing you survived. The words hit like a blade. Celine looked down at her clawed hands, at the black veins spreading up her arms. She thought of Kael, of Garrett, of the council, of every wolf who had watched her fall. She thought of dying without making them pay. Then she started walking toward the tunnel. The creature's laughter followed her into the dark. You're going to be magnificent. The tunnel sloped downward. The blue light faded behind her and the darkness ahead was absolute. But Celine could see, not with her eyes, with something else. Some new sense that painted the world in shades of gray and black. She could feel the mountain breathing around her, could sense the weight of stone pressing in from all sides, could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. The roar came again. So close now the vibration knocked loose pebbles from the ceiling. Celine's claws extended without her meaning to. Her body was responding to threat on instinct. Predator instinct. The tunnel opened into a cavern so massive she couldn't see the far walls. The floor was littered with bones, thousands of them, skulls of wolves and creatures she didn't recognize, rib cages large enough to park a car inside. And in the center of it all, something moved. It was the size of a house, covered in scales that looked like they'd been carved from shadow itself. 6 legs, each ending in talons that scarred the stone when it walked. A serpent's head with eyes that burned the same crimson as the shadow wolves. It saw her. The creature's massive head swung toward Celine, and its mouth opened, revealing rows of teeth like swords. Then it spoke. Its voice was old, older than stone, older than memory. A pretender, it said. They send me a pretender child who reeks of surface filth and broken oaths. Celine's legs wanted to run. Her body wanted to flee. But she held her ground. I'm not a pretender, she said. Her voice was steadier than she expected. The creature laughed. The sound shook bones loose from the ceiling. You are nothing. A cast-off Luna with delusions of power. You think because you've been touched by shadow that makes you worthy? You think that makes you queen? It lowered its massive head until its snout was inches from Celine. She could feel the heat of its breath, could smell sulfur and death. I've eaten 100 queens, it hissed. What makes you different? Celine met its burning gaze. I'm still breathing, she said. For another moment the creature stared, then its jaw unhinged and it lunged. Celine dove left as jaws the size of a wagon snapped shut where her head had been a heartbeat before. The force of the bite sent shockwaves through the cavern floor. Bones exploded into dust under the pressure. She rolled to her feet, claws scraping stone. Her body moved faster than thought, faster than it should have been possible. The black veins crawling up her arms pulsed with heat. The serpent thing coiled around, tracking her movement. Its eyes burned like forge fire. Fast for a pretender, it rumbled. But speed won't save you. Its tail whipped around faster than anything that size had a right to move. Celine jumped, but not high enough. The scaled appendage caught her ribs and launched her across the cavern. She hit a pile of bones hard enough to crack them. Pain bloomed through her back. She pushed herself up, spitting blood. Her vision swam. The creature was already moving toward her massive body, flowing across the floor like liquid nightmare. "You're weak," it said. Soft. "The surface world made you pathetic." Celine's claws dug into the stone beneath her. Something was building in her chest. Not fear. Something hotter. Something that tasted like copper and rage. The creature's head came down again, mouth open wide enough to swallow her whole. Celine didn't move. Didn't run. She stared into that abyss of teeth and let the rage take over. Her scream tore through the cavern. But it wasn't a human sound. It was something ancient. Something that made the very bones around her rattle. The creature froze. Its crimson eyes went wide. Celine felt her body change. Not fully, not completely, but enough. Her claws lengthened. Her teeth sharpened. The black veins spread across her face and down her neck. When she opened her eyes again, she knew without seeing that they were no longer silver. They were obsidian. The creature pulled back. For the first time, something like respect flickered across its massive face. "There you are," it said softly. "There's the queen." Celine lunged. She didn't think about it, didn't plan. Her body knew what to do. She hit the creature's scaled neck and her claws sank deep. Black blood sprayed across stone. The creature roared and thrashed, but Celine held on. She climbed higher, digging her claws in like climbing spikes. The serpent bucked and twisted, trying to throw her off, but she was locked in now. Past reason. Past fear. She reached the base of its skull and drove both hands in deep. The creature's roar became a shriek. It slammed itself against the cavern wall, trying to crush her, but Celine twisted at the last second. The impact jarred her bones, but she didn't let go. "Enough," the creature gasped. "Enough, little queen. You've proven yourself." Celine's claws were buried knuckle-deep in its flesh. Her teeth were bared. Every muscle in her body screamed for her to finish it, to tear until there was nothing left. But somewhere beneath the rage a voice whispered, not the creature's voice, not the shadow wolf who had brought her here, her own voice, quiet and steady. "You're not a monster yet." Celine pulled her claws free. Black blood ran down her arms. She jumped from the creature's back and landed in a crouch 20 feet below. Her legs absorbed the impact without buckling. The serpent lowered its head to the ground. Its breathing was labored. The wounds Celine had carved into its neck leaked dark fluid onto the stone. "You could have killed me," it said. "Why didn't you?" "Because I'm not you," Celine said. Her voice was raw. "Because killing when I don't have to makes me the same as the wolves who threw me down here." The creature's eyes studied her. Then slowly, deliberately, it lowered its massive head until its snout touched the floor. "You are my queen," it said. "I acknowledge you. I obey you. And I will follow you into whatever war you choose to wage." The word settled over Celine like a weight. She looked at the creature bleeding before her, at the cavern filled with bones, at her own hands still dripping with black blood. "What have I become?" she whispered. "Whatever you need to be," a voice said from behind. Celine spun. The shadow wolf from before stood at the tunnel entrance. Her crimson eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "You passed the first trial," the creature said. "Most don't survive it. Most die screaming in the first 30 seconds. But you didn't just survive. You dominated. I didn't want to hurt it. You didn't want to," the shadow wolf agreed. "But you could have. And you chose mercy. That's what makes you dangerous, little Luna. Not your claws, not your strength, your restraint. Because the moment you decide to stop holding back," she smiled, "the surface world won't stand a chance." Celine looked at her hands again. The claws were retracting. Slowly, the black veins were fading back beneath her skin, but she could still feel them, could feel the power coiled inside her like a serpent waiting to strike. "How many more trials?" she asked. The shadow wolf's smile widened. "As many as it takes." The days that followed blurred together. There was no sun down here, No way to mark time except by the ache in her muscles and the blood under her claws. The shadow wolves put her through hell. They made her fight creatures pulled from nightmares. Made her navigate tunnels that shifted and changed while she was inside them. Made her endure tests of will where voices whispered in her head for hours trying to break her mind. And through it all, the shadow wolf who had first found her watched. Never helped. Never intervened. Just watched with those burning eyes and that knowing smile. Celine learned to hate that smile. On what might have been the 5th day or the 50th, she found herself standing in a chamber filled with mirrors. Every surface reflected her image back 1,000 times. But the reflections were wrong. Some showed her as she'd been before, Luna Celine Ravenwood with silver eyes and hope still intact. Others showed her as she was becoming, claws and fangs and eyes like midnight. And some showed things she didn't want to look at too closely, futures maybe, or fears given shape. The trial is simple, the shadow wolf's voice echoed through the chamber. Choose which version of yourself is real. Celine turned in a slow circle. Every mirror showed something different. In one, she was standing over Kael's body. In another, she was kneeling before the council begging for mercy. In a third, she was surrounded by shadow wolves with a crown of bone resting on her head. They're all real, Celine said quietly. Wrong, the shadow wolf replied. Only one is true. Choose. Celine stopped moving. She stared at her reflection in the mirror directly ahead. This one showed her as she was right now, covered in scars, eyes shifting between silver and black, caught between what she'd been and what she was becoming. This one, she said. The shadow wolf materialized beside her. For the first time, she didn't look pleased. Why? Because I'm not who I was, Celine said, and I'm not who I'll be. I'm standing in the middle, and that's where the choice lives. The mirrors shattered, every single one exploded simultaneously into glittering fragments that hung in the air like stars. The shadow wolf laughed. The sound was almost warm. You're learning, she said. The fragments fell. When they hit the ground, they didn't shatter further. They melted, dissolved into shadow that crawled back into the walls. Celine turned to face the shadow wolf directly. What's your name? She asked. The creature tilted her head. Why do you want to know? Because if I'm going to trust you, I need to call you something other than monster. The shadow wolf's expression flickered. Something almost vulnerable crossed her face before the mask slid back into place. Nyx, she said. My name is Nyx. Celine nodded. Nyx. How much longer? How much longer until what? Until I'm ready. Nyx studied her for a long moment. The crimson eyes seemed to look through flesh and bone straight into whatever passed for a soul. You're already ready, Nyx said. You've been ready since the moment you chose to live instead of die. The trials aren't to make you strong, little Luna. They're to make you realize you already are. Then why keep testing me? Because strength without control is just violence, and violence without purpose is just chaos. Nyx stepped closer. You want to go back up there and tear apart the wolves who betrayed you. I can see it in your eyes every time you fight, every time you draw blood. You want them to suffer. Yes, Celine said. The word came out cold, flat. Good. Nyx smiled. Hate is useful. Rage is useful. But if that's all you have, you'll burn yourself out before you ever reach them. So I'm teaching you control. Because when you finally face Kael again, I want you to look him in the eye while you destroy everything he loves. And I want you to do it with a smile. The words should have horrified her, should have made her recoil, but they didn't. Because Nyx was right. Celine wanted Kael to suffer, wanted the council to suffer, wanted every wolf who had watched her be dragged away to know what real betrayal felt like. And that wanting didn't make her a monster. It made her human. Or maybe that was the same thing. The final trial came without warning. Celine woke in a chamber she didn't recognize. The walls were carved with symbols that hurt to look at, ancient script that predated any language she knew. Nyx stood in the center of the room. Around her were 12 shadow wolves, all of them watching Celine with crimson eyes. This is the last one, Nyx said. Pass this and you become our queen. Fail and you die here. What do I have to do? Kill me! The words hung in the air. Celine stared. What? You heard me? Nyx's expression was calm. To rule the Shadow Wolves, you have to prove you can make the hard choices, the choices that cost you. So kill me, right here, right now, and the kingdom is yours. Celine's hands curled into fists. This is insane. This is necessary. Nyx spread her arms wide. I'm unarmed. I won't fight back. All you have to do is tear out my throat, and it's done. The 12 Shadow Wolves watched in silence. Their eyes reflected nothing. Celine took a step forward, then stopped. Why? She asked. Why what? Why do you want me to kill you? Because leadership requires sacrifice. Nyx's voice was steady. And if you can't sacrifice the one who saved you, then you're not strong enough to lead. You didn't save me. Celine's voice was rising. You used me. You needed a queen, and I was convenient. True, Nyx said. But I also gave you a chance when everyone else gave you a grave. So what's it going to be, little Luna? Are you going to take what you want, or are you going to hesitate until someone else takes it from you? Celine's claws extended. The black veins crawled up her arms. Her vision sharpened. She could see Nyx's pulse beating in her throat, could smell the blood beneath her skin. One strike. That's all it would take. She moved forward. Nyx didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there waiting. Celine raised her hand. Her claws gleamed in the dim light. Then she drove them into the stone wall beside Nyx's head. The impact cracked the rock. Dust rained down. No, Celine said. Nyx's eyes widened. What? I said no. Celine pulled her claws free. I'm not killing you. Not because I can't. Because I won't. Then you fail, Nyx said, and you die. The 12 Shadow Wolves moved. They circled Celine, claws extended, ready to tear her apart. Celine didn't move. She looked each of them in the eye, one by one. If that's what it takes, she said quietly, then I die. But I'm not becoming the kind of queen who murders the people loyal to her just to prove a point. The Shadow Wolves stopped. They looked at Nyx. Nyx stared at Celine. Then slowly a smile spread across her face. Not the predatory grin Celine had grown used to. Something genuine. Stand down, Nyx said. The Shadow Wolves backed away. Nyx stepped forward and went to one knee. She bowed her head. You pass, she said. Not because you were willing to kill, but because you were willing to die rather than betray yourself. The 12 Shadow Wolves dropped to their knees in unison. Hail the Shadow Queen, they said as one. Hail Celine Ravenwood. The words echoed through the chamber, through the tunnels beyond, through the entire mountain. And somewhere far above on the surface world, Celine knew that wolves were pausing. We're looking up at Black Hollow Mountain. We're feeling something shift in the foundation of reality. Nyx rose to her feet. She reached into her cloak and pulled out something wrapped in black silk. When she unwrapped it, Celine saw a crown, not gold or silver. Bone. Ancient bone carved with the same symbols that covered the chamber walls. This belonged to the first Shadow Queen, Nyx said. It's been waiting 1,000 years for someone worthy to wear it. She placed it on Celine's head. The moment the bone touched her skin, Celine's vision exploded. She saw everything, every tunnel in the mountain, every shadow wolf waiting in the dark, every prisoner who had ever died in these depths. And beyond that, she saw the surface, saw the kingdom, saw the palace where Kael sat on his throne, saw the wolves who had condemned her going about their lives like she had never existed. The rage that filled her was cold, controlled, absolute. When her vision cleared, Nyx was watching her. What now? Nyx asked. Now, Celine said. We make them remember. Time moved differently after that. Celine spent what might have been weeks or months learning to command the Shadow Wolves, learning the extent of her new power. She could move through shadows now, could feel every wolf in her kingdom through the bond that connected them, could kill with a thought if she chose to. But she didn't choose to. Not yet. Because Nyx had been right. Rage without control was just noise, and Celine wanted her revenge to be surgical. Reports began filtering down from the surface, whispers carried by scouts who could walk between worlds. The kingdom was fracturing. 3 months after Celine's imprisonment, the Alpha Council had dissolved into infighting, territorial disputes, old grudges surfacing. Kael was struggling to hold them together. His authority was slipping. Good, Celine thought. Let him feel what it's like when everything you built starts to crumble. She was in her chamber studying maps of the surface when Nyx entered. The shadow wolf looked troubled. "What is it?" Celine asked. "News from above." Nyx hesitated. "There's been an execution." Celine's hand stilled. "Who?" "A wolf named Marcus. He was beta to the Eastern Pack. They accused him of conspiring with rogues." Celine knew Marcus. He'd been one of the few who had spoken against her imprisonment, had demanded a proper trial. "Let me guess," she said. "No trial." Nyx nodded. They dragged him into the square and cut his throat in front of his pack. Something cold settled in Celine's chest. "How many? How many what? How many wolves have they executed since I was imprisoned?" Nyx was quiet for a moment. 17, all of them accused of treason, all of them killed without trial. Celine stood. The map scattered to the floor. "They're consolidating power," she said, "removing anyone who might question them, anyone who might remember there used to be laws." "It's working," Nyx said. "The packs are terrified. No one speaks against the council anymore." Celine walked to the chamber entrance. Beyond it, the massive cavern stretched out. Hundreds of shadow wolves moved through the space. Her army, her kingdom. "How long until we're ready?" she asked. Nyx came to stand beside her. "That depends." "What are we getting ready for?" Celine turned to look at her. The crown of bone rested heavy on her head. Her eyes were fully black now. No trace of silver remained. "War," she said. The word fell into silence. Nyx's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Then we're ready now." They spent the next week preparing. Celine had Nyx gather intelligence on every alpha in the council. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their secrets. She studied the layout of the capital, memorized guard rotations, identified which wolves might be sympathetic to her cause and which would need to be removed. She was meticulous, thorough, cold. The broken Luna, who had been dragged into this mountain, was gone. In her place stood something new, something that made even the oldest shadow wolves nervous when she walked past. On the night before they were set to march, Celine stood alone in the highest chamber of the underground kingdom. A crack in the ceiling let in moonlight, real moonlight, the first she'd seen in months. She tilted her head back and let it wash over her face. "You don't have to do this," a voice said. Celine didn't turn. She knew Nyx's voice by now. "Yes, I do." Nyx stepped into the moonlight beside her. "Why? You could stay here. Rule the shadow wolves. Build something new instead of tearing down the old. Because they need to answer for what they did. To you or to the 17 they killed after?" "Both." Nyx was quiet for a moment. "When you go back up there, you won't be able to hide what you've become. The moment they see you, they'll know you're something else. Something they can't control." "Good," Celine said. "Let them be afraid. And if they try to kill you again, then I'll make sure I take them with me." The moonlight gleamed on the bone crown, on Celine's black claws, on the obsidian eyes that no longer held any trace of the wolf she'd been. Nyx reached out and placed a hand on Celine's shoulder. The gesture was almost gentle. "You're going to burn that kingdom to ash," she said softly. "Only the parts that deserve it. And if you can't tell the difference anymore?" Celine finally turned to look at her. The question hung between them. "Then I guess I'll burn it all," Celine said, "and build something better from what's left." Nyx nodded slowly. "Then let's go remind them what happens when you bury queens alive." They marched at dawn, or what passed for dawn in the endless dark beneath the mountain. 300 shadow wolves moving as one through tunnels that wound upward toward the surface, toward light, toward the kingdom that had forgotten them. Celine led from the front. The bone crown sat heavy on her head. Her claws scraped stone with every step. Behind her, Nyx walked in silence. Behind Nyx came the ancient serpent from Celine's first trial. It had pledged itself to her service, and now it moved through the tunnels like liquid death. They reached the final barrier as the sun was setting above. A massive stone door sealed from the outside. It had stood closed for 1,000 years. Celine placed her hand against it, felt the weight of history, felt the fear of the alphas who had sealed the shadow wolves away, hoping they'd never return. She smiled. Then she drove her fist through solid rock. The door exploded outward. Stone and dust filled the air. Light poured in, real sunlight that burned Celine's eyes after months in darkness. But she didn't look away. She stepped through the opening into the world above. They emerged in a forest. Ancient trees towered overhead. The air smelled of pine and earth and things that lived in daylight. And 50 yards away, standing in shocked silence, was a patrol of palace guards. They stared. At Celine. At the crown of bone. At the army of shadow wolves pouring out of the mountain behind her. One of the guards dropped his weapon and ran. The others stood frozen. Celine walked toward them. Her footsteps were silent on the forest floor. "Tell your alpha," she said, "that his dead Luna sends her regards." The guards broke. They scattered into the trees, screaming warnings that would reach the capital by nightfall. Nyx came to stand beside Celine. "Subtle," she said. "Subtle is for wolves who have something to hide," Celine replied. "I want them to know I'm coming. I want them to lie awake tonight wondering what I've become. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we give them the answer." The shadow wolves spread out through the forest. Some took to the trees. Others melted into actual shadows. Within minutes, the only evidence they'd been there at all was Celine standing alone in the clearing. She looked up at the sky. At stars she hadn't seen in what felt like a lifetime. Then she turned her gaze toward the east, toward the capital, toward the palace where Kael slept thinking he was safe. "I'm coming," she thought, "and when I'm done you're going to wish you'd killed me when you had the chance." The wind picked up. It carried her scent toward the capital, toward wolves who would smell it and remember. Celine smiled. Then she walked into shadow and disappeared. The capital city of Silvercrest sprawled across the valley like a sleeping beast. Torches burned in windows. Guards walked the walls. Life continued as it always had for wolves who believed themselves safe behind stone and steel. Celine stood on the ridge overlooking it all. The bone crown felt lighter now, or maybe she'd just grown used to the weight. Nyx materialized from shadow beside her. The shadow wolf's eyes tracked the patrol routes below. "They've doubled the guard since word reached them," Nyx said. "Kael knows you're coming." "Good." Celine's voice was flat. "I want him awake when I arrive. The plan is simple. We hit the palace at midnight." Nyx gestured toward the eastern wall. "That section is weakest. We breach there and move straight to the throne room, fast and brutal." "No." Nyx turned. "What?" "We're not breaching anything." Celine kept her eyes on the city. "I'm walking through the front gate. That's suicide. That's a statement." Celine finally looked at her. "I didn't crawl out of that mountain to sneak around like a criminal. I'm the wrong party here. I'm the one they threw away. So I'm going to walk right up to their door and make them let me in. And if they don't, then we'll see how well their walls hold against 300 shadow wolves." Nyx studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled. "You've changed little Luna." "I had to." The words hung between them, truth stripped bare. Celine started down the ridge. Behind her, the shadow wolves began to move. They flowed through the darkness like water. By the time the city guards noticed anything wrong, it would be too late. They reached the main gate an hour before midnight. Massive wooden doors reinforced with iron. Guards stood at attention on either side. Torches cast their shadows long across cobblestone. Celine walked out of the darkness into the light. The guards saw her and froze. Their hands went to their weapons but didn't draw. They just stared. At her eyes. At the crown. At the way shadow seemed to cling to her like a second skin. "Open the gate," Celine said. Her voice carried no threat. No anger. Just absolute certainty. The guard on the left found his voice. "The city is closed. By order of Alpha Kael, no one enters after dark." "I'm not no one." Celine took another step forward. "I'm Luna Celine Ravenwood, and your Alpha put me in a grave. So either open this gate or I'll open it myself." "You're dead," the guard whispered. "We watched them take you to Black Hollow. You're supposed to be dead." "Clearly I got better. Now open the gate." The guards looked at each other. Behind Celine, the darkness moved. Shadow wolves emerged from every direction, hundreds of crimson eyes burning in the night. The guard on the right made his choice. He turned and ran for the alarm bell. Celine was faster. She moved through shadow and appeared in front of him. Her hand caught his throat before he could scream. "I said open the gate," she repeated. "Not raise the alarm, not run away. Open the gate." She released him. The guard stumbled back, gasping. The other guard was already working the mechanism. The massive doors began to swing inward. The grinding of gears echoed through the night. Celine walked through. The shadow wolves followed. 300 nightmare creatures pouring into the capital like a flood. Citizens who'd been walking the streets scattered. Windows slammed shut. Doors were barred. Within minutes, the streets were empty except for Celine's army moving toward the palace. They reached the main square as the alarm bells finally began to ring. Palace guards poured out of the barracks. 200 warriors in full armor forming ranks between Celine and the palace steps. At their head stood a wolf Celine recognized. Garrett, the same guard who'd visited her in the prison. He looked older now, tired. His hand rested on his sword, but he hadn't drawn it yet. "That's far enough," he called out. Celine stopped 20 feet from the guard line. Nyx came to stand at her right. The ancient serpent coiled around behind her left. The rest of the shadow wolves spread out, filling the square. "I'm here to see Kael," Celine said. "Alpha Kale," Garrett corrected, "and he doesn't receive visitors in the middle of the night. He'll receive me, or I'll walk over your corpses to find him." "Your choice." Garrett's jaw tightened. "You should be dead. People keep saying that." Celine tilted her head. "But here I am, alive, changed, and very, very patient. So let me through, Garrett. You don't want this fight." The guards shifted nervously. They could see what Celine had become, could smell the power rolling off her in waves. Garrett drew his sword. The sound of steel leaving leather cut through the night. "I have my orders," he said. "No one gets through." Celine sighed. "Such loyalty. I remember when you used to show me that same loyalty. Back when I was Luna, back before your alpha decided I was disposable. You were found guilty. I was framed." Celine's eyes locked onto his. "And deep down you know it. You've always known it. But you followed orders anyway because that's what good soldiers do." Garrett's sword wavered. Something flickered across his face. "How many more have died since me?" Celine pressed. "How many wolves has Kael executed without trial? How many families destroyed because someone asked the wrong question?" The square was silent. Every guard was listening now. 17, Celine said. "That's how many. 17 loyal wolves murdered to protect a lie. So tell me, Garrett, are you going to die protecting that same lie? Or are you going to step aside and let me give your alpha the trial he never gave me?" Garrett's hand was shaking. The sword point dropped an inch. "Stand down," a voice commanded from behind. Everyone turned. Kael stood at the top of the palace steps. He wore the formal armor of his station, gold and silver that caught the torchlight. His face was carved from stone. Beside him stood 3 other alphas, the council members who had condemned Celine. "Let her through," Kael said. "If the dead Luna wants an audience, she can have one." The guards parted. Slowly, reluctantly, creating a path straight to the palace. Celine walked forward, each step deliberate, controlled. The shadow wolves stayed behind, but she could feel them, could feel their hunger vibrating through the bond. She climbed the steps until she stood face to face with the man who had destroyed her life. Kael's expression gave nothing away, but his eyes widened slightly when he saw what she'd become. The black eyes, the claws, the crown of bone. "Hello, husband," Celine said softly. "Miss me?" Kael's hand moved to his sword. "What are you?" "I'm what you made me," Celine smiled. "You threw me into the dark, and this is what crawled back out." One of the council members stepped forward, an older alpha named Thorn. His face was pale. "This is impossible," he said. "The shadow wolves are extinct. They've been gone for 1,000 years. Clearly, someone forgot to tell them." Celine turned her gaze on him. "But don't worry, Thorn. They remember you. They remember all of you. And they've been waiting a very long time for this reunion." Kael found his voice. "Why are you here, Celine? To give you what you never gave me. A trial. A chance to defend yourself. A moment to explain why you betrayed the one person who would have died for you." Kael's jaw clenched. "I had evidence. You had a planted vial and a convenient excuse to remove me." Celine moved closer. "Who gave you that vial, Kael? Who whispered in your ear that I was the enemy? Because it wasn't me planning treason. It was someone close enough to frame me for it. I did what was necessary to protect the kingdom. You did what was necessary to consolidate power." "There's a difference." The third council member laughed. A wolf named Castor with scars covering half his face. "Listen to the traitor queen," he said. "Coming here with her monsters making accusations? You should have stayed buried, Celine." "I would have," Celine said. "But someone kept digging up innocent wolves and executing them, 17 in 6 months. That's a lot of bodies, Castor, almost like someone's trying to eliminate witnesses. Castor's smile froze. Witnesses to what? Kale asked. Celine turned back to him. To who actually planted that vial? To who's really pulling the strings? To the fact that you've been a puppet this whole time and you were too arrogant to see it. Enough, Kale snarled. You come here with your army of nightmares and dare accuse me of being manipulated? I'm not accusing you of being manipulated. Celine's voice went cold. I'm accusing you of being weak, of believing the first lie someone fed you because it was easier than trusting your own mate. Kale's hand went to his sword. You lost the right to call yourself my mate when you tried to poison the bloodline. I never touched that vial. But someone did. Someone who needed me gone. Someone who benefits from this chaos. Who? Kale demanded. If you're so certain someone framed you, then name them. Celine opened her mouth to respond. That's when Thorn moved. He was fast for an old wolf. His blade cleared its sheath and drove straight for Kale's back. The Alpha didn't see it coming, didn't have time to react. Celine did. She moved through shadow and materialized between them. Thorn's blade hit her shoulder instead of Kale's spine. Pain exploded through her arm, but she grabbed the sword with her other hand and held it in place. Thorn's eyes went wide. He tried to pull back, but Celine's grip was iron. There's your answer, she said. Then she ripped the blade from his hand and drove her claws into his chest. Thorn gasped. Blood poured from his mouth. He staggered back and fell. The square erupted. Guards drew weapons. The shadow wolves surged forward. Castor turned to run, but Nyx appeared from nowhere and slammed him to the ground. Kale stood frozen, staring at Thorn's body. At the blade that had been aimed at his back. He was going to kill you, Celine said quietly. Right here in front of everyone. Make it look like I did it. Blame me for one more crime I didn't commit. Thorn coughed. Blood bubbled between his lips. He was dying, but not dead yet. Kale knelt beside him. Why? His voice was raw. Why Thorn? The old Alpha laughed. The sound was wet. For power. For the throne. For everything you were too noble to take for yourself. You framed Celine. I planted the vial. Thorn's eyes were fading. Convinced you she was the threat. Got rid of 17 others who might have questioned it. All to clear the path. Path to what? To my son becoming Alpha when you fell. Thorn's breath rattled, but the little Luna survived, came back stronger, ruined everything. His eyes went empty. The life left him. Kale stood slowly. He looked at Celine. At the blood running down her shoulder from where she'd taken the blade meant for him. You saved me, he said. Don't sound so surprised. Celine's voice was bitter. I told you I was innocent. You just didn't want to believe it. I thought the evidence was clear. Evidence can be manufactured. Trust can't. Celine pulled Thorn's sword from her shoulder. The wound began to close immediately, black veins spreading across the torn flesh, knitting it together. You chose to believe poison over the mate bond. You chose politics over truth. And 17 wolves died because of it. Kale's face crumpled. His hands shook. For the first time since Celine had known him, he looked lost. What have I done? He whispered. What every Alpha does when they forget that power without wisdom is just tyranny. Celine turned away. Now you get to live with it. She started down the steps. The shadow wolves parted for her. Wait, Kale called. Celine stopped. Didn't turn around. What happens now? Kale asked. Now you clean up your own mess. Execute the conspirators. Find out how deep Thorn's corruption ran. Restore order to the kingdom he tried to destroy. And you? I'm going home. Celine looked back over her shoulder. To the mountain. To the wolves who actually value loyalty over lies. You're still Luna of this pack. Kale's voice was desperate. You're still my mate. No. Celine's eyes were cold. I was your mate, before you threw me away. Now I'm something else, and I don't answer to you anymore. She walked away. Nyx fell into step beside her. The shadow wolves followed. Behind them, Kyle stood alone among the bodies of the wolves who'd betrayed him. They were halfway across the square when Celine felt it. A shift in the air, a presence that made her skin crawl. She spun. Castor was standing, but something was wrong with him. His body was twisted, bones cracking and reforming. His eyes were no longer wolf amber. They were the same crimson as the shadow wolves. Nyx cursed. That's impossible. What is he? Celine demanded. Castor's mouth opened, but the voice that came out wasn't his. Did you really think Thorn was working alone? The voice was ancient, cold. You stupid children, so eager to blame the obvious villain you never looked deeper. Castor's body continued to change, growing taller, skin darkening to shadow, claws extending. What's happening to him? Kyle shouted from the steps. He's transforming, Nyx said. Someone's been feeding him shadow wolf blood. For years, probably. Turning him into something that shouldn't exist. A hybrid, Celine realized. Worse, Nyx said. A weapon. Castor threw his head back and screamed. The sound shattered windows. Wolves collapsed, holding their ears. When the scream ended, Castor looked at Celine. His face was no longer entirely human. You think you're special, he said. You think because you passed a few trials and earned a crown that makes you queen? I've been drinking shadow blood since before you were born. I've been preparing for this war for decades. What war? Celine demanded. The war for what comes next. Castor smiled. Thorn was a fool, a useful idiot, but the real plan was never about making his son Alpha. It was about creating chaos, about weakening the kingdom from within until something stronger could take over. You, me, and the others like me. There are dozens of us spread throughout the packs, all waiting for the signal. What signal? Your return, Castor laughed. We needed the shadow wolves to reveal themselves, needed them to show the world they weren't extinct, and we needed a queen dumb enough to bring them to the surface. Celine's blood went cold. You wanted me to escape. We made sure you'd survive. Made sure you'd grow strong. Made sure you'd come back angry and powerful. Because now the alphas have seen what shadow wolves can do. And they're terrified. Tomorrow they'll be calling for extermination. And when that war starts, the hybrids will be ready to pick up the pieces. Castor's body finished changing. He stood 8 feet tall, muscle and shadow and teeth. A nightmare-given flesh. Thank you for doing exactly what we needed, he said. Now die knowing you doomed your own people. He lunged. Celine met him halfway. They collided with force that cracked the cobblestones. Castor's claws raked her ribs. She drove her knee into his gut. They separated and circled. The shadow wolves surged forward, but Nyx held them back. This is her fight, Nyx said. Castor was faster than he had any right to be. Stronger, too. He'd been feeding on shadow blood for years while Celine had only months. He caught her throat and lifted her off the ground. You were never meant to win, he hissed, just to be a catalyst. Celine's vision darkened. Her claws scraped uselessly against his arm. This was it. She'd survived prison, survived trials, survived everything the mountain could throw at her, just to die in the street executed by a creature that shouldn't exist. The bone crown slipped from her head. It hit the ground and shattered. No, Nyx screamed, but Celine barely heard it, because something was happening. The crown breaking released something. Power flooded through her, not the controlled strength she'd learned to wield, something older, wilder. The full force of the Shadow Queen bloodline unleashed all at once. Her eyes went from obsidian to pure void. Her body erupted with shadows that had mass and weight. Castor's grip loosened. Celine tore free, and when she landed, her form had changed. She was no longer human, no longer wolf. Something in between. Something the first Shadow Queen might have been before history rewrote her as a monster. Castor took a step back. For the first time, fear crossed his face. What are you? He whispered. I'm what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. Celine moved. Castor tried to block, but she was everywhere at once. Her claws found his throat, his chest, his legs. In 3 seconds, she'd carved him into pieces. He fell. She stood over him, breathing hard. The shadows receded. Her form shifted back. Human again, but different, marked by what she'd just done. The square was silent. Every wolf watching her with expressions caught between awe and terror. Celine looked at Kyle. He was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. How many more? She asked. How many other hybrids are hiding in the packs? Kale's mouth opened, closed. He had no answer. Find them, Celine said, before they can coordinate, before they can launch whatever war they've been planning. And if we can't, then you'd better hope I'm feeling generous when it all falls apart. She turned away. The Shadow Wolves closed ranks around her. They began to move back toward the gate. Celine? Kale called one last time. I'm sorry for all of it. Celine stopped, didn't look back. Sorry doesn't bring back the dead, she said, and it doesn't undo 6 months of hell, but it's a start. She walked into shadow and disappeared. The journey back to the mountain was silent. 300 shadow wolves moving through darkness. When they reached the hidden entrance, Celine stopped. The fragments of her crown were in her hands. She'd gathered them before leaving the city. It's broken, Nick said softly. Everything's broken. Celine looked at the pieces. My life. My mate bond. My identity. This crown is just one more thing. We can forge another. No. Celine closed her fist around the fragments. This one served its purpose. What comes next needs something different. What comes next? Celine looked at Nyx, at the shadow wolves waiting in the dark, at the mountain that had been her prison and her salvation. Now we prepare for war. Real war. Because Castor was right about one thing. The alphas are going to panic. They're going to see what I've become and decide all shadow wolves need to die. And when they come for us, we'll be ready. Nyx smiled. And then? Then we show them what happens when you try to bury queens who refuse to stay dead. Celine walked into the mountain. The shadow wolves followed. Behind them, the entrance sealed itself, stone grinding against stone until no trace remained. In Silvercrest, Kyle stood in his war room surrounded by maps and reports, evidence of Thorn's conspiracy, names of suspected hybrids, locations of cells throughout the kingdom. It was worse than he'd imagined. The corruption ran deeper than any of them had known. He looked at the empty chair beside his throne, Celine's chair, the one she'd never sit in again. His hand clenched into a fist. He'd broken something that couldn't be fixed, betrayed someone who would have burned the world for him. And now she was gone, changed into something that looked at him with eyes that held no love, only cold assessment. A guard entered. My lord, the council is requesting an emergency session. Tell them I'll be there shortly. The guard hesitated. They're saying we need to address the Shadow Wolf threat, that we need to mobilize the armies before... Before what? Before the queen in the mountain decides we're all her enemies. Kale's jaw tightened. She's not the enemy. The council thinks otherwise. Then the council is wrong. Kale stood, and I'll make sure they understand that. He walked out. Behind him, the maps waited. The names. The evidence of a conspiracy that had nearly destroyed everything. Beneath the mountain, Celine stood in her chamber. The broken crown lay on the table before her. She placed her hands on either side and closed her eyes. Images flashed. Castor's transformation. His words. The implication that dozens more hybrids were scattered throughout the kingdom waiting to strike. She'd thought she'd come home for revenge, for justice, for the satisfaction of watching Kyle realize his mistake. But Castor had turned her return into something else, into a declaration of war between species, into the catalyst for the very conflict she'd hoped to avoid. And now she had a choice. She could stay hidden, let the surface world tear itself apart while she built her kingdom in shadow, safe, separate, untouchable. Or she could fight, risk everything she'd built to stop a war that wasn't even hers to fight. Nyx entered without knocking. She looked at Celine, at the broken crown. What are you thinking? Nyx asked. That I'm tired of being someone else's weapon. Celine's voice was quiet. Thorn used me. Castor used me. Even the Shadow Wolves used me to claw their way back into the world. So what do you do? Celine picked up a fragment of the crown. It cut her palm. Black blood welled up. I stop letting other people write my story, she said. I stop reacting and start deciding. And I figure out what I actually want instead of what everyone else wants from me. And what do you want? Celine looked at the blood on her hand, at a reflection in the polished bone, at the wolf staring back with eyes like midnight. I want the truth, she said, about my mother, about the Shadow Queen bloodline, about why I survived when I should have died. The answers are in the deep archives, Nyx said, but no one's been down there in centuries. Then it's time someone went. Celine dropped the crown fragment. It clattered against the table. Tomorrow we go deeper, she said, past the trials, past the kingdom, down to where the real secrets are buried. And if you don't like what you find, Then I'll finally know what I'm actually fighting for. She walked to the window. Far above the crack in the ceiling showed stars. The same stars that shone over Silvercrest, over Kael, over a kingdom balanced on the edge of war. Celine pressed her bloody palm against the stone. Everything she'd believed was a lie. Her mate had betrayed her. Her people had abandoned her. And now even her resurrection had been part of someone else's plan. But lies could be unraveled, betrayals could be answered, and plans could be broken. She just had to be willing to become something no one expected, something beyond queen, beyond weapon, beyond the categories everyone kept trying to force her into. The stars burned cold and distant. Celine smiled. Let them come, she thought. Let the alphas march. Let the hybrids reveal themselves. Let the whole rotten kingdom collapse under the weight of its own corruption. Because when the dust settled, she'd still be standing, and this time she'd be standing on ground of her own choosing. The mountain trembled. Deep in the archives, something ancient stirred. Celine felt it through the stone, through the bond, through the blood running in her veins. Tomorrow she'd go looking for answers. Tonight she'd prepare for the possibility that the truth was worse than any lie. The deep archives waited 3 miles beneath the mountain's heart. Celine stood at the entrance to a tunnel so old the stone had turned to glass under centuries of shadow magic. Her breath misted in air that hadn't been disturbed since the first Shadow Queen walked these depths. Nick stood beside her holding a torch that burned with cold blue flame. The light didn't penetrate far. Whatever waited below seemed to drink it. Last chance to turn back, Nick said. Once we go down there, the old magic will know we're here. It might not let us leave. I've been buried alive before. Celine started walking. I survived it then. I'll survive it now. Her footsteps echoed wrong, like the tunnel was bigger than it appeared, or maybe sound traveled differently this far from the surface, this far from anything that resembled the world she'd known. They descended for what felt like hours. The tunnel spiraled downward in a pattern that made Celine's eyes hurt if she looked at it too long. Geometric but wrong, angles that shouldn't connect but did anyway. How did your people even build this? She asked. We didn't. Nix's voice was quiet. This was here before us, before wolves, before anything with a name. The first Shadow Queen found it and claimed it, built her kingdom around it like a shell around a pearl. What's at the bottom? The truth? Or madness? Nix glanced at her. Sometimes they're the same thing. The tunnel opened into a chamber so vast the torch couldn't find the walls. The floor was covered in symbols carved so deep, Celine could have fit her whole arm inside the grooves. They pulsed with faint red light like veins carrying poisoned blood. In the center stood a pool of liquid shadow. Not water, not oil. Something that moved with its own intelligence. Celine approached slowly. The symbols beneath her feet grew brighter with each step. This is it, Nick said. The memory pool. Everything the Shadow Queens ever knew is preserved here. Their lives, their deaths, their secrets. How do I access it? You drink. Celine stared at the pool. The surface rippled though nothing had touched it. And if it kills me? Then you weren't meant to know. Nix's expression was unreadable. The pool doesn't lie. But truth has a cost. Celine knelt beside the pool. Her reflection stared back. Black eyes, pale skin, the face of someone who'd died and come back different. She cupped her hands and drank. The liquid burned going down. Not heat, something colder than ice. It hit her stomach and exploded outward through every nerve in her body. Celine's vision went white. Then she was somewhere else. She stood in a throne room that no longer existed. Massive columns carved from single pieces of obsidian. A ceiling painted with constellations that hadn't been visible for 1,000 years. And on the throne sat a woman who looked exactly like Celine. The same black eyes, the same bone structure, but older, harder, wearing a crown of actual bone and iron that looked like it had grown from her skull. The first Shadow Queen. You came, the woman said. Her voice echoed from every direction. I wondered if my bloodline would survive long enough to find this place. Celine tried to speak, but no sound came out. The Shadow Queen smiled. You can't talk here. This is memory. You can only listen, so listen carefully because I won't repeat myself. She stood. Her movements were fluid, predatory. Everything you think you know about us is a lie, she said. The Alphas rewrote history to make us monsters. Said we were demons. Said we corrupted the pure wolf bloodlines. But the truth is simpler and worse. She walked closer. Celine couldn't move, couldn't look away. We were the original wolves, the Shadow Queen said, before the split, before the surface clans. We lived in darkness because darkness was safe, because the things that hunted us couldn't follow us there. What things? The Shadow Queen's eyes flashed. Worse things than you can imagine. Things that made wolves prey instead of predators. So we adapted. We took power from shadow itself, became something that could fight back. And it worked? For a while. The Shadow Queen's expression darkened, until we realized the power had a price. It changed us, made us stronger but less human. Our children were born with claws. Our elders forgot their names. We were becoming the very monsters we'd hidden from. So you stopped. We tried to. The Shadow Queen laughed bitterly. Some of us chose to stay in the dark, to accept what we'd become. Others fled to the surface, tried to dilute the blood with normal wolves, tried to forget where they came from. My mother. Yes. The Shadow Queen nodded. Your mother was 9th-generation surface blood, diluted enough to walk in daylight, weak enough to die from a simple fever. But the bloodline never truly disappears, it just sleeps, waiting for the right catalyst. Being thrown in a mountain prison, being broken completely. The Shadow Queen's voice was gentle now. Power doesn't awaken from comfort. It comes from necessity, from the moment when death is certain and something inside you decides to fight anyway. The vision shifted. Celine saw her mother now, young and beautiful, standing in a forest clearing. Across from her stood a wolf Celine recognized from old portraits. Her father. They were arguing. You can't ask me to hide this, Celine's mother said. Our daughter has the right to know what she is. She has the right to a normal life. Celine's father looked haunted. If the Alphas find out she carries Shadow Queen blood, they'll kill her. They'll kill all of us. Then we run. We can't run from every pack in the kingdom. Her father grabbed her shoulders. Please, let me bury this. Let me protect our family. Celine's mother pulled away. And when the blood wakes anyway? When she's older and the power manifests? What then? It won't. Not if we're careful. Not if we keep her away from shadow magic. You're asking me to cripple our child. I'm asking you to save her life. The vision fractured. Celine saw her mother years later, sick, dying, the fever burning through her while healers stood helpless. But it wasn't a fever. It was shadow magic eating her from inside. The blood she'd suppressed for years finally demanding its due. Celine watched her mother die screaming. Your father thought he was protecting you, the Shadow Queen said, but he just delayed the inevitable. The blood always finds a way. The vision shifted again. Now Celine saw Kael, young, before they'd met. He stood in a war room with Thorn and Castor. We need to eliminate the shadow bloodlines completely, Thorn was saying. Every wolf with even a trace of that corruption. That's genocide, Kael said. We can't just murder entire families. We can if they're a threat to the kingdom. Castor leaned forward. The hybrids are proof the blood can be weaponized. If our enemies figure out how to do it on a larger scale, we're finished. Kael looked sick. There has to be another way. There isn't. Thorn's voice was cold. But we need to be subtle. Can't just start executing wolves without cause. We need to identify them first. Track them. Wait for the right moment. And if they never give us cause, then we create it. Celine felt her heart crack. Kael had known. Before they'd even met, he'd been part of a conspiracy to exterminate her entire bloodline. The vision shattered. She was back in the throne room with the first Shadow Queen. He loved you anyway, the Shadow Queen said, despite everything he'd been taught, despite his orders. When he met you, he chose you over duty. That's why Thorn had to act, because Kael was going soft. The vial. The vial was always the plan. Frame you, remove you, force Kael back into line. But they didn't count on you surviving, didn't count on the Shadow Wolves still being down here. So none of this was my choice. Selena's voice finally worked. I was always just a piece in someone else's game. No. The Shadow Queen's eyes blazed. You had a choice in the mountain. When Nyx offered you power, you could have refused, could have died with your dignity intact. But you chose to live, chose to fight. That choice was yours and no one else's. The throne room began to fade. Wait, Celine called. I need to know more. I need to understand what I'm supposed to do. You're supposed to survive, the Shadow Queen said. That's all any of us can do. Survive and make sure the ones who tried to bury us regret it. How? By becoming what they fear most. Not a monster, not a victim, something in between, something they don't have words for yet. The vision dissolved completely. Celine crashed back into her body, gasping. She was on her hands and knees beside the pool. Black liquid dripped from her mouth. Nyx hauled her upright. What did you see? Everything. Celine's voice was raw. My mother, my father, Kyle. All of it. And I need to get to the surface. Now. They ran. Back through the tunnel. Up the spiral. Celine's legs burned, but she didn't slow. She could feel it now, could feel the pieces clicking into place. Thorn was dead, but the conspiracy wasn't. Castor had said dozens of hybrids were scattered through the packs, which meant somewhere there was a leader, someone coordinating, someone who'd benefit most from wolves and shadow wolves destroying each other. They burst into the main cavern. Shadow wolves looked up startled. Gather everyone, Celine commanded. Full war council, now. What's happening? One of the wolves asked. We're out of time. Celine was already moving toward the war room. They're coming and we're not ready. Who's coming? Everyone. The war room filled within minutes. 300 shadow wolves packed into a space meant for half that. Celine stood at the head of the table. The broken crown fragments lay before her. Nyx stood at her right, the ancient serpent coiled at her left. We have a problem, Celine said. The hybrids aren't just scattered cells, they're coordinated, and they've been planning this for decades. Planning what? Nyx asked. A three-way war, shadow wolves versus surface packs versus hybrids. Winner takes everything. That's insane, one of the wolves said. We'd all lose. Exactly. Celine slammed her hand on the table. That's the point. Burn it all down. Build something new from the ashes. With the hybrids in control because they're the only ones who can survive in both light and shadow. How do you know this? Because I saw it. Celine touched the crown fragments. The memory pool showed me everything. Thorn was just a puppet. Castor was middle management. The real leader is still out there. Who? That's what we need to find out. Celine looked at each wolf in turn. Because they're going to make their move soon. Probably within days. And when they do, we need to be ready to hit back so hard they never recover. The room was silent. Then a younger shadow wolf spoke up. What if we just stay down here? Let them fight it out above. Survive in the dark, like we always have. We tried that for 1,000 years, Celine said. It didn't work. Eventually they came looking. Eventually they found us. And next time they will too. The only way to be safe is to make sure there's no next time. You're talking about conquest. I'm talking about survival. Celine's voice was iron. We go up there. We find the hybrid leader. We expose the conspiracy before it can launch. And we force every pack in the kingdom to acknowledge we have a right to exist. And if they refuse, then we remind them what happens when you try to genocide an entire species. One of the older wolves stepped forward. You're asking us to risk everything, to walk back into the light after 1,000 years in hiding. What if we lose? Then we die fighting instead of hiding. Celine met his eyes. I've done both. Fighting is better. The old wolf studied her. Then he dropped to one knee. I follow my queen, he said. One by one the others knelt. 300 shadow wolves pledging themselves to a war they might not survive. Celine felt the weight of it. Every life in this room was now hers to spend or save. Every death would be her responsibility. This was what leadership actually meant. Not crowns or thrones or pretty speeches, just the terrible mathematics of choosing who lives and who dies. She thought of Kyle standing in his war room making the same calculations, wondering if this was how he'd felt when he'd signed her death warrant. The difference was she knew these wolves, had bled with them, had earned their loyalty through trials instead of inheriting it through bloodline. If she spent their lives, it would be for something that mattered. On your feet, she said. We have work to do. The wolves rose. Nyx began organizing them into strike teams. The serpent slithered off to wake the other ancient creatures in the deep. Within an hour, the mountain was alive with preparation. Celine stood alone in her chamber. She'd changed into armor. Black leather reinforced with shadow-forged metal. It moved like silk but could turn a blade. She was strapping on her weapons when someone knocked. Enter. Kael walked in. Celine's hand went to her sword. How did you get in here? Your guards let me through. Kael looked exhausted. Said you'd left orders I was to be allowed. That was before. Celine didn't draw the blade but didn't release it either. What do you want? To help. Kael moved closer slowly. I know what I did. I know I can't undo it. But the kingdom is about to tear itself apart and I can't stop it alone. Not my problem. Yes, it is. Kael's voice was urgent. Because when the war starts, every pack will blame you. They'll say you came back with an army, say you started this, and they'll unite against you. Let them come. You can't fight the entire kingdom. Watch me. Kael grabbed her shoulders. Celine's hand clamped on his wrist, her claws extended. One wrong move and she'd open his veins. They stared at each other, inches apart, breathing hard. I love you, Kael whispered. I never stopped. Even when I thought you'd betrayed me, even when I signed the order. I loved you and I'll hate myself for what I did until the day I die. Love doesn't mean anything without trust. Celine's voice was cold. And you proved I can't trust you. Then let me earn it back. Let me stand with you. You want to help? Celine shoved him away. Find out who's leading the hybrids. Get me a name, a location, something I can actually use. Then maybe we can talk. I don't have that information. Then get it. You're the alpha. You have resources I don't, so use them. Kael's jaw clenched. And if I do? If I bring you what you need? Then I'll consider not killing you when this is over. The words hung between them. Brutal, honest. Kael nodded slowly. I'll find them, whatever it takes. He turned to leave. Kael. He stopped. Why did you really come here? Celine asked. Not to help, not to apologize. Why? Because I needed to see you. Kael didn't turn around. Needed to know if there was anything left of the woman I married, or if she died in that mountain. Celine considered lying, considered twisting the knife. She died, Celine said quietly. But what came back is stronger. Remember that. Kael left without responding. Celine stood alone again. Her hands were shaking. She'd held a blade to her mate's throat and felt nothing but cold calculation. Part of her wondered if that made her a monster. The rest of her didn't care. The attack came at dawn 3 days later. Not on the mountain, on the capital. A runner burst into the war room where Celine was planning the offensive. She was covered in blood. Not all of it hers. The hybrids, she gasped. They hit Silvercrest. Dozens of them. They're slaughtering everyone. Celine was moving before the wolf finished talking. She grabbed her weapons and ran for the exit. Nyx caught her arm. This could be a trap. I don't care. Celine pulled free. If Kael dies now, I'll never get the information I need. That's not why you're going. Celine stopped, turned. You still love him, Nyx said. Despite everything. You're going because you can't let him die. I'm going because it's strategic. Liar. They stared at each other. Then Celine smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Fine. I still love him. I still hate him. Both things are true. Now are you coming or not? Nyx's grin was fierce. I wouldn't miss it. They emerged from the mountain with 200 shadow wolves. The rest stayed behind to guard the deep archives. Celine led them through shadow. They moved faster than normal wolves could track, faster than should have been possible. The capital was burning when they arrived. Fires lit the sky. Smoke poured from broken windows. Bodies littered the streets. Wolves torn apart by claws that had come from their own kind. The hybrids had done this. Celine's rage was ice cold, controlled, absolute. Find survivors, she commanded. Get them to safety. Kill anything that tries to stop you. The shadow wolves scattered. Celine ran toward the palace. She could hear fighting, could smell blood and smoke and terror. The main gates were shattered. Inside the courtyard, wolves fought wolves, or what had been wolves. The hybrids were bigger now, stronger, like they'd stopped hiding what they were. Celine hit the nearest one at full speed. Her claws punched through its spine. It died without a sound. She moved to the next, and the next. Her body was a weapon, every strike lethal, every movement precise. This was what the trials had taught her. Not just how to fight, how to kill efficiently, how to turn rage into something useful. She cut through the courtyard, leaving bodies in her wake. made it to the palace doors. They were barred from inside. She kicked them off the hinges. The throne room was chaos. 30 hybrids fighting half that many palace guards. Kael stood in the center, surrounded by corpses. His armor was dented. His sword dripped red. He saw Celine and something crossed his face. Relief, hope, fear. She didn't have time to parse it. She charged into the melee. The hybrids turned to face her, recognized what she was. "The Shadow Queen," one of them snarled. "Kill her and this ends." They rushed her as one. Celine smiled. Then she let the darkness take over completely. Her form shifted. Not fully hybrid. Something else. Something the old Shadow Queens had been before they'd learned restraint. Pure, concentrated violence given flesh. She tore through them, claws and teeth and shadows that had mass. Blood sprayed across marble. Screams cut short. Bodies fell in pieces. When it was over, she stood alone among the dead. Her chest heaving, her claws dripping, her eyes completely black. Kael stared at her. The surviving guards stared at her. No one spoke. Then one of the hybrids she'd thought dead lunged. It drove a blade into her back. The point erupted from her chest. Celine looked down at the steel protruding from her ribs. Kael roared. His sword took the hybrid's head off. Celine fell to her knees. Blood poured from the wound. Too much blood. She tried to speak, but liquid filled her throat. Kael caught her, lowered her to the ground. "No," he was saying. "No, no, no. Stay with me, please." Celine's vision was fading. She could feel her heart struggling. The blade had pierced it. She was dying. Again. Somewhere deep inside the Shadow Queen, blood stirred. It had saved her before. It could save her now. All she had to do was let go, let the darkness consume her completely, become something that couldn't die because it was never fully alive. But if she did that, she'd lose the last piece of herself that was still human. Still Celine. The choice crystallized. Die as herself or live as a monster. Kael's face swam above her. He was crying. She'd never seen him cry before. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "I'm so sorry." Celine reached up, touched his face. Her hand left a bloody print on his cheek. "Find them," she whispered. "The leaders. Make them pay. Don't leave me." "Not your choice." Her hand fell. Her eyes closed. The throne room erupted into screams. Nyx burst through the doors with 50 shadow wolves. She saw Celine's body and her face went white. "No," Nyx breathed. She ran forward, dropped to her knees. "No, you don't get to die. Not after everything." She placed her hands on Celine's chest. Shadow magic poured out. Not healing. Something else. A transfusion of pure darkness. Celine's body convulsed, her back arched. Her mouth opened in a soundless scream. The blade was pushed out from inside. The wound began to close. Black veins spread across her skin, knitting flesh back together. But her eyes, when they opened, were no longer black. They were crimson, like the shadow wolves, like the ancient predators. Celine sat up. Everyone stepped back. She looked at her hands, at the claws that had grown longer, at the way shadow clung to her skin like a living thing. "What did you do?" she asked Nyx. "Saved you." Nyx's voice was shaking. "Or damned you. I'm not sure which." Celine stood. Her legs were steady. Too steady. She felt no pain, no weakness, just cold certainty. She looked at Kael. He was staring at her like she was a stranger. Maybe she was. "The hybrid leader," she said. "Where are they?" Kael swallowed hard. "We found them. During the attack, our scouts tracked the coordination signals. They're in the old fortress, 20 miles north." "How many?" "Hundreds." Kael's voice was hollow. "It's their base, their army, everything." Celine turned to Nyx. "How many can we field?" 200 here, another 100 at the mountain, against hundreds. We've faced worse odds." Celine walked to the throne room windows. Outside, the city still burned. Wolves were dying. The kingdom was collapsing. And somewhere north, the creature responsible was waiting, confident, certain their plan had worked. She smiled. "Tomorrow we march," she said. "We take every shadow wolf we have, every guard who can hold a weapon, every wolf in this kingdom who's tired of being afraid." "That's suicide," one of the guards said. "Probably." Celine turned to face them all. "But I'm tired of reacting, tired of waiting for the next attack. So we're going to end this, one way or another. Kale stepped forward. I'm coming with you. No, you're not. You're staying here, rebuilding, protecting the survivors. I can fight. I know. Celine's voice softened slightly. But if we lose, I need someone alive who knows the truth, who can tell the next generation what really happened. That's you. And if you win, then I'll come back, and we'll figure out what the hell we're supposed to do with a kingdom built on lies. She walked toward the door. The shadow wolves fell in behind her, Nyx at her side. Celine, Kale called. She paused. Didn't turn. I love you. I know. Celine's voice was almost gentle. That's why this hurts. She walked out. Behind her, Kale stood alone in a throne room filled with bodies. Outside the palace, Celine gathered her army, 300 wolves, shadow and surface both, united by necessity, if not trust. She stood before them. The crimson eyes blazed in the firelight. Tomorrow we end this war, she said. Tomorrow we show every wolf who ever thought we were weak what real strength looks like. Tomorrow we take back our right to exist. The wolves howled. The sound echoed across the burning city. A promise. A threat. Celine threw her head back and howled with them. 20 miles north in the old fortress, the hybrid leader heard that sound. They smiled. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The Shadow Queen was coming. And when she arrived, the trap would spring. Either way, the old world would burn, and from the ashes something new would rise. The old fortress crouched on the northern ridge like a predator waiting to strike. Stone walls blackened by centuries of weather, towers that had watched empires rise and fall. It had been abandoned for 200 years after the last war nearly destroyed it. Now it teemed with life again. Hybrid life. Celine stood at the edge of the forest looking up at those walls. 300 wolves behind her. Shadow and surface mixed together in an alliance that shouldn't exist but did anyway. Because sometimes survival meant putting aside old hatreds long enough to face a new threat. The sun was setting. Blood-red light spilled across the valley. They're waiting for us, Nyx said quietly. They know we're here. Of course they do. Celine's crimson eyes tracked the parapets. This whole thing was designed to bring me here, to force a confrontation. So what do? We give them what they want. Celine turned to face her army. But not the way they expect. She raised her voice so every wolf could hear. The hybrids want a war, she said. They want us to charge those walls, throw ourselves at their defenses until we're too broken to fight back. They want to prove that shadow wolves and surface wolves can't work together, that we'll turn on each other the moment things get hard. The wolves listened in silence. So we're not going to give them that satisfaction. Celine's voice was iron. We're going in quiet. We're going in smart. And we're going to tear their leadership apart before they even know we're inside. How? One of the surface wolves asked. Those walls are 20 feet high and they'll have archers on every tower. We don't go over the walls. Celine looked at Nyx. We go under them. The shadow wolf's grin was vicious. The old sewers, they'll be guarded. By wolves who've never fought in complete darkness. Celine's eyes blazed. But we have. It took an hour to find the sewer entrance, a grate half buried in decades of sediment. They pried it open and the stench that poured out made even the shadow wolves gag. Lovely, Nyx muttered. Celine went first, dropped into darkness that swallowed her whole. Her feet hit stone 10 feet down. Water rushed past her ankles. Not water, something fouler. The others followed. One by one, 300 wolves descended into the fortress underbelly. The tunnel was tight, cramped. Some of the larger wolves had to crouch. They moved in silence. Every sound echoed wrong down here, amplified and distorted until you couldn't tell if footsteps were 10 feet away or 100. Celine's new eyes cut through the dark like it didn't exist. She could see every crack in the stone, every piece of debris floating past. The darkness that had once terrified her now felt like coming home. Maybe that should have scared her, the way she'd changed, the way she'd adapted to become something that belonged in places like this. But fear was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. They reached a junction where 3 tunnels met. Celine raised her hand. The column stopped. Nyx moved up beside her. What is it? Guards, Celine pointed. 20 yards ahead, 4 of them. I don't hear anything. You will. Celine moved forward alone. Her footsteps made no sound. She'd learned that in the mountain trials. How to walk like shadow itself. How to be present without presence. The guards were hybrids, bigger than normal wolves but not fully transformed. They stood in a circle around a torch, talking in low voices. "This is stupid," one was saying. "Why are we down here? The action's going to be at the walls." "Orders," another replied. "The commander wants every entrance covered. The commander's paranoid. The commander kept us alive this long." Celine was 5 feet away now, close enough to smell their sweat, close enough to hear their hearts beating. She struck. The first guard died without a sound. Her claws opened his throat before his brain registered movement. The second turned and got her other hand through his chest. The third managed to draw a weapon before she broke his neck. The fourth ran. Celine caught him in 3 strides, slammed him against the wall. Her hand covered his mouth, cutting off the scream. "How many in the fortress?" she asked quietly. The hybrid's eyes were wild with terror. He tried to bite her hand. She squeezed until bones cracked. "How many?" 500, he gasped when she loosened her grip. "Maybe more. They've been gathering for weeks." "Where's the commander?" The hybrid laughed. It was a broken sound. "You'll never reach him. He's in the central tower, surrounded by his elite guard. You'd need an army to get through." "I have an army." Celine leaned closer. "What I need is a way in that doesn't involve fighting through 500 hybrids. There isn't one." "Liar." The hybrid's smile was bloody. "Kill me then. I'm not telling you anything." Celine studied him, saw the fanaticism in his eyes, the absolute certainty. This wolf would die before betraying his commander. She respected that, even as it frustrated her. "Fine," she said. Then she snapped his neck. The body dropped. Celine stood over it, feeling nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction, just cold calculation. She'd become efficient at killing, too efficient, maybe, but efficiency kept her people alive, so she'd live with the cost. The army caught up. They saw the bodies. No one commented. They moved deeper. The tunnels opened into a massive cistern. Stone columns held up a vaulted ceiling. Water pooled in the center, reflecting nothing. Above them, Celine could hear footsteps. Voices. The fortress going about its business, unaware of the army gathering beneath it. "We're under the main courtyard," Nick said. "The central tower should be directly above us. How do we get up?" Celine looked at the ceiling, saw a grate 20 feet overhead. Light filtered through the gaps. She pointed. That. It took 15 minutes to get the grate open. They worked in silence. When it finally gave way, Celine pulled herself up into a storage room filled with weapons and armor. Empty. For now. She helped the others up. They filled the room. Too many wolves for the space, bodies pressed together. Celine moved to the door, pressed her ear against it, heard guards passing outside, counted their footsteps. 4 wolves, heavily armed. She waited until they passed, then opened the door and led her army into the fortress proper. They moved through corridors lit by torches, past rooms where hybrids slept or ate or sharpened weapons. No one saw them. No one raised an alarm. It was almost too easy. That thought made Celine's skin crawl. They reached the base of the central tower. A spiral staircase climbed into darkness. 2 guards stood watch at the bottom. Celine killed them both before they could blink. "Up," she commanded. The army surged forward, 300 wolves pouring up the stairs. The sound of their movement finally triggered alarms. Bells began ringing throughout the fortress. So much for stealth. The stairs opened into a great hall. And there, standing in the center, surrounded by 100 elite guards, was the hybrid commander. Celine stopped. The army spread out behind her. The commander smiled. He was massive, 8 feet tall, covered in muscle and scars. His eyes burned gold instead of crimson. "Hello, Celine," he said. His voice was cultured, almost gentle. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." Celine's claws extended. "Who are you? Don't you recognize me?" The commander tilted his head. "I suppose I have changed quite a bit. Last time you saw me, I was just another council member. Forgettable. Weak. Understanding hit like a fist." "Marcus," she whispered. "But you're dead. Kale said they executed you." "They executed someone," Marcus agreed. "A volunteer who looked enough like me to fool casual observers. I've been here building my army while the surface world thought I was rotting in a grave." "Why? Why?" Marcus laughed. "Because I watched Thorn and Castor, and all the other alphas play their little games for decades. Watch them fight over scraps of power while the kingdom rotted from within. I realized the only way to fix it was to burn it all down and start over, with you in charge. With hybrids in charge. Marcus gestured at his guards. We're the future Selene, not purely shadow, not purely surface. Something new, something that can survive in both worlds. By murdering everyone who disagrees, by removing the old guard who can't adapt. Marcus stepped forward. You of all wolves should understand. They threw you away. Buried you alive. You came back changed and stronger. That's what I'm offering the entire kingdom. Through genocide. Through evolution. Marcus' voice hardened. The weak die. The strong survive. That's nature. That's tyranny. Call it what you want. Marcus spread his arms. The result is the same. In 6 months, every pack will bow to hybrid rule or cease to exist. Selene's rage was ice cold. Over my dead body. That's the idea. Marcus smiled. Kill you. Blame the Shadow Wolves for the capital attack. Use the outrage to justify exterminating them completely. Then position hybrids as the saviors who avenge the fallen. It's elegant, really. You're insane. I'm practical. Marcus nodded to his guards. Kill her. Keep the body intact. We'll need it for the display. The guards charged. The great hall erupted into chaos. Shadow Wolves met hybrid guards in a collision of claws and fury. Blood sprayed across stone. Screams echoed off vaulted ceilings. Selene fought her way toward Marcus. Every hybrid that got in her path died. She was beyond thought now, beyond strategy, just pure focused violence. Marcus met her head on. Their collision shattered the floor beneath them. They fell through into the room below, crashed through furniture, kept fighting. Marcus was strong. Stronger than anything Selene had faced, except maybe the ancient serpent. His claws opened gashes across her arms, her ribs, her face. But Selene had learned to ignore pain, had learned to keep moving even when her body screamed for her to stop. She drove her claws into his gut, felt them punch through muscle and organ. Marcus roared and headbutted her. Her vision exploded into stars. They separated, circled each other, both bleeding, both breathing hard. You can't win, Marcus said. Even if you kill me, the movement continues. There are cells in every major pack, hybrids in positions of power. You're fighting an idea, Selene. And ideas don't die. No. Selene smiled through bloody teeth. But the wolves who spread them do. She attacked, not with claws this time, with shadow itself. She'd learned this in the trials. How to weaponize darkness. How to make it solid and sharp and lethal. The shadows wrapped around Marcus like chains, pulled tight. He struggled, but they held. Selene walked forward, placed her hand on his chest. You want to talk about evolution? She said quietly. About adapting to survive? I adapted Marcus. I became what I needed to be, but I didn't lose my humanity doing it. That's the difference between us. She drove her hand through his rib cage, felt his heart beating against her palm. Marcus' eyes went wide. Blood poured from his mouth. You were right about one thing, Selene said. The old world is broken, but we don't fix it by becoming worse than what came before. We fix it by being better. She crushed his heart. Marcus died staring at her with something that might have been respect or might have been fear. Selene pulled her hand free. Let the body fall. Above her, the fighting was ending. She could hear it. The sounds of combat fading to groans and gasps. She climbed back up. The great hall was carnage. Bodies everywhere, blood pooling between stones. But her wolves were standing, battered, broken, but alive. The hybrid guards who'd survived had thrown down their weapons. Nyx limped over. Her arm hung at a wrong angle, but she was grinning. We won, she said. We survived. Selene looked at the bodies, counted the cost. We lost 40 wolves, maybe more. That's not winning. It's not losing either. Selene turned to the surrendered hybrids. They stared at her with expressions ranging from terror to defiance. You have a choice, she told them. Renounce Marcus' ideology. Help us root out the remaining cells. Live as citizens of a kingdom that accepts you for what you are, or die here maintaining loyalty to a dead wolf's failed dream. The hybrids looked at each other. One by one they knelt. Not all of them. A few remained standing, faces hard, ready to die for their beliefs. Selene respected that even as it hurt. Take the ones who won't bend outside, she told her wolves. Give them warrior deaths, quick and clean. The defiant hybrids were led away. They went with heads high. The rest stayed kneeling. Get up, Celine said. You're not prisoners. You're wolves who made bad choices following a persuasive leader. We've all been there. She turned to Nyx. Send runners to every pack. Tell them the hybrid threat is ended. Tell them the shadow wolves had nothing to do with the capital attack. Tell them the truth about everything. And if they don't believe it, then we'll deal with that when it happens. Celine was exhausted suddenly. Every wound ached. Every muscle screamed. But the war was over. They'd won. Or at least survived. Maybe those were the same thing. It took 3 days to secure the fortress, to root out the remaining fanatics, to begin the work of dismantling the hybrid network. They found evidence, documents detailing Marcus' plan, names of conspirators in every pack, proof of Thorn and Castor's involvement, proof that would clear Celine's name completely. She stood in Marcus' war room looking at the maps he'd used to plan his conquest. Red marks indicated packs he'd compromised. Black marks showed targets for elimination. Nearly a quarter of the kingdom had been marked black. He really was going to burn it all down, Nyx said quietly. Celine traced the marks with one claw. He thought he was saving it. That's what makes fanatics dangerous. They genuinely believe they're the heroes. Aren't we doing the same thing? Maybe. Celine looked at her. But we're trying to build something instead of just destroying. That has to count for something, does it? The question hung between them. Celine didn't have an answer. On the 4th day, Kael arrived with an army of surface wolves. He came expecting a battle and found instead a fortress full of exhausted wolves cleaning up the aftermath. He found Celine in the central tower. She was sitting on the steps where Marcus had died. Blood still stained the stone beneath her. You won, he said. We survived. Celine didn't look at him. Lost 40 good wolves doing it. Another dozen who'll never fight again from their injuries. That's not winning. Kael sat beside her. Not touching, just present. They were silent for a long time. I found evidence, Celine finally said. In Marcus' papers. Proof that you were going to break the extermination order. That you'd argued against it. That you were trying to protect the shadow bloodlines. Kael's breath caught. I was. But I was too slow, too cautious. By the time I worked up the courage to defy the council, Thorn had already planted the vial. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed. Kael's voice was raw. I knew what the council was planning. I should have stopped it immediately. Instead, I tried to work within the system, tried to change minds gradually, and while I was being diplomatic, they were murdering families. You're not responsible for their actions. I'm responsible for my inaction. Kael finally looked at her. I let fear of losing my position stop me from doing what was right, and 17 wolves died because of it. 18. Celine met his eyes. I died too. Maybe not physically at first, but the woman you married, she died in that prison cell. What came back is something else. I can see that. They looked at each other, really looked, seeing the damage, the scars, the ways they'd both been broken and reforged. I don't know if I can forgive you, Celine said quietly. I don't know if what you did can be forgiven. I know. But I also know you're trying, that you're here, that you came even though you knew I might kill you for what you did. I would have deserved it. Probably. Celine's smile was tired. But that's not who I want to be. The Shadow Queen who rules through fear and punishment. I've seen where that path leads. Marcus walked it all the way to madness. So what do you want to be? I don't know yet. Celine stood. But I know I'm tired of defining myself by what was done to me. Tired of letting my trauma make all my decisions. What changed? I did. Celine looked down at him. I spent months becoming a weapon, becoming something strong enough to survive. But strength isn't the same as wisdom. Power isn't the same as peace. I learned that watching Marcus die still believing he was right. And now? Now I figure out how to be strong without being cruel. Powerful without being tyrannical. How to build instead of just breaking. That's going to be hard. Everything worth doing is. Kael stood. We could do it together, rebuild the kingdom, create something better than what came before. Maybe. Celine turned away. But not yet. I'm not ready to stand beside you again. Too much has happened, too much pain. I understand. Do you? Celine looked back. Because I need you to really understand. This isn't me being cruel. This isn't punishment. I just need time to figure out who I am now, what I want, what kind of life I'm trying to build. Take all the time you need. Kael's voice was steady. I'll be here when you're ready, and if you're never ready, I'll accept that too. Why? Because I love you. Kael's eyes held hers. Not the version of you that existed before, but who you are now. Scars and claws and crimson eyes and all. I love you and I'll wait as long as it takes. The words hit harder than any blade. Celine felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, opening. I don't know if I love you anymore, she whispered. I don't know what I feel. That's okay. Is it? Yes. Kael smiled. It's honest, and that's more than we've had in a long time. Celine nodded slowly. Then leave. Take your army. Go back to Silvercrest. Start the work of rebuilding. And you? I'm taking the Shadow Wolves home, to the mountain. We'll help root out the remaining hybrid cells. Make sure this really is over. Then we'll see. Will you come back? Eventually. Celine met his eyes. But on my terms. In my time. When I'm ready. I'll wait. Kael left without touching her, without trying to force a connection that didn't exist yet. Celine watched him go and felt something that might have been relief or might have been grief. Maybe both. The journey back to Black Hollow Mountain took 2 weeks. They moved slowly. Many of the wolves were injured. All of them were exhausted. When they finally saw the mountain rising against the sky, Celine felt something she hadn't expected. Relief, like coming home. The mountain that had been her prison was now her sanctuary. The darkness that had terrified her was now comfortable. She'd changed. Fundamentally. Irrevocably. But maybe that was okay. They descended into the depths. Into the kingdom beneath the kingdom. The Shadow Wolves who'd stayed behind greeted them with howls that echoed through stone. Celine stood in the great cavern and looked at her people. 300 wolves who'd followed her into battle. Who'd trusted her leadership. Who'd survived because she'd made the right calls. The weight of that settled on her shoulders. This was what leadership actually meant. Not crowns or thrones or pretty speeches. Just the daily work of keeping your people alive and safe and hopeful. She could do that, would do that, but she'd do it her way. Over the following months, the Shadow Wolves emerged from hiding, not as conquerors, as citizens. They integrated slowly into surface society. Some packs welcomed them. Others remained hostile. But the hostility was manageable now, based on prejudice instead of orchestrated genocide. They could work with prejudice. Celine spent her days mediating disputes, building alliances, teaching surface wolves that shadow wolves weren't monsters, just wolves who'd adapted differently. It was exhausting work, frustrating work, but it mattered. At night, she'd stand at the mountain entrance and look toward Silvercrest, toward the capital where Kael was doing his own rebuilding. Sometimes she wondered what would have happened if things had been different, if Thorn had never planted that vial, if she and Kael had been allowed to just be happy. But those thoughts were pointless. You couldn't change the past. You could only decide what to do with the present. 6 months after the fortress battle, a runner came from Silvercrest. He carried a message sealed with Kael's mark. Celine opened it alone in her chamber. The message was simple. The kingdom is hosting a unity celebration. All packs are invited, the Shadow Wolves especially. I hope you'll come. I miss you. No demands, no expectations, just an invitation. Celine stared at the words for a long time. Then she called for Nyx. Pack your formal gear, she said. We're going to a party. Nyx raised an eyebrow. You're ready for that? I don't know. Celine folded the message. But I won't figure it out hiding in the dark. The celebration was massive. Thousands of wolves from every pack. They gathered in Silvercrest's Grand Plaza where 8 months earlier Celine had walked through with an army of shadow wolves. Now she walked through with just Nyx at her side. Both wore formal armor, black and silver, elegant but functional. Wolves stared as they passed, some with curiosity, some with fear, some with barely disguised hatred. Celine met every gaze steadily. She wasn't the broken Luna they'd condemned anymore. She was the Shadow Queen who'd stopped a war. Let them look. Let them judge. She'd earned her place here through blood and pain and choices that would haunt her forever. Kale stood at the center of the plaza. He wore the formal regalia of his station, gold and white. He looked older than she remembered, tired. But when he saw her, his face lit up. Celine felt her heart skip. Maybe there was still something there after all. She approached slowly. The crowd parted. By the time she reached him, the entire plaza had gone silent. "You came," Kyle said. "You invited me." Celine's voice was steady. "I'm trying to be better about accepting invitations." A smile tugged at his lips. "How's the mountain?" "Crowded." "How's the capital?" "Chaotic." "We're still finding hybrid cells. Still dealing with the aftermath. It'll take time." "Years, probably." Kale looked at her, at the crimson eyes that would never be silver again. "I don't suppose you'd consider coming back, helping rebuild from the inside?" Celine considered it, really considered it. "Not yet," she finally said. "I'm not ready. Maybe I never will be. But I'm willing to visit, to help when I can, to try. That's more than I hoped for." "Don't get too excited." Celine's smile was wry. "I'm still deciding if I can trust you, if we can ever have what we had before." "We can't!" Kael's honesty surprised her. What we had before was built on assumptions that turned out to be lies. But maybe we can build something new, something stronger because it's built on truth instead of fantasy. Maybe. They stood facing each other, the entire kingdom watching. Then Kael extended his hand. Celine looked at it, at the gesture, at what it represented. A new beginning. A choice to move forward instead of staying trapped in the past. She took his hand. The crowd erupted into cheers. Celine let herself be pulled into his embrace, let herself feel the warmth of his arms, let herself remember what it was like to be held by someone who loved her. It didn't fix everything, didn't erase the pain or the betrayal or the months she'd spent buried alive. But it was a start. And sometimes that was enough. The celebration continued late into the night. Wolves danced and drank and celebrated the fragile peace they'd built. Celine stood on a balcony overlooking it all, Kael beside her, not touching, just present. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That this is fragile," she said, "that it could all fall apart tomorrow, that we're one crisis away from everything collapsing again." Probably true. But for tonight it's holding. For tonight, wolves who wanted to kill each other 8 months ago are drinking together. That's something. It's everything. Kael looked at her. "You did that. You forced us to see each other as something other than enemies." "We did it," Celine corrected. "You, me, Nyx, every wolf who chose to fight for something better instead of just fighting." "Still." Kael's smile was soft. "You started it. You crawled out of that mountain and refused to let hatred define you. That took courage I'm not sure I have." "You have it." Celine finally looked at him. "You proved it by letting me go, by not trying to force me to forgive you, by giving me the space to figure out who I am now. And who are you?" "I'm still deciding." Celine turned back to the plaza. "But I know I'm not just a victim, not just a weapon. I'm someone who survived the worst thing that ever happened to her and chose to build instead of destroy. That's more than most can say. It's enough. For now." They stood in comfortable silence. Below, the celebration continued. Life going on despite everything that had tried to stop it. Celine felt the bone fragments in her pocket. She'd carried them since the fortress. Pieces of the crown that had broken when she'd nearly died. She pulled them out, looked at them in the moonlight. "What are you going to do with those?" Kael asked. Kael. "I don't know." Celine turned them over in her hands. "Part of me wants to reforge them, reclaim the title, be the Shadow Queen officially. And the other part wants to throw them away. Stop defining myself by titles and crowns and what other people expect me to be." "What will you choose?" Celine looked at the fragments, at the pieces of who she'd been. Then she threw them off the balcony. They fell into darkness and disappeared. "Neither," she said. "I am not the Shadow Queen. I'm not the Broken Luna. I'm just Celine, a wolf who survived. Who's trying to build a life worth living?" Hale smiled. "I can live with that." "Good." Celine turned to face him fully. "Because that's all I have to offer right now. Not a queen, not a mate, just me. Damaged and dangerous and trying. That's more than enough." "Is it?" "Yes." Kale's voice was certain. Because you're here. Because you're trying. Because despite everything that was done to you, you're still choosing to hope. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen. Celine felt tears sting her eyes. The first she'd cried since the mountain. She let them fall. Kale pulled her close. She let him. Let herself break down. Let herself feel all the pain and fear and exhaustion she'd been holding back for months. And when the tears finally stopped, she felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but lighter. It was a start. The celebration ended as dawn broke. Wolves stumbled home exhausted and happy. The plaza emptied slowly. Celine and Nyx prepared to leave. They'd stay one more day to handle diplomatic matters. Then back to the mountain. But as Celine walked toward the gate, she stopped, turned back. Kale stood in the plaza, alone, watching her go. Their eyes met across the distance. Celine raised her hand, a small wave, a promise that this wasn't goodbye forever. Kale waved back. Then Celine turned and walked away, Nyx at her side, the shadow wolves following. They had work to do, a kingdom to rebuild, a future to forge from the ashes of the past. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But for the first time since she'd been thrown into that mountain, Celine felt something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Not the naive hope of her youth, but something harder. Something earned through suffering and survival. The hope of someone who'd died and chosen to come back anyway. Who'd been broken and refused to stay that way. Who'd been buried alive and clawed her way back to the surface. That kind of hope couldn't be killed. Couldn't be crushed. Couldn't be taken away, because it wasn't based on circumstances. It was based on choice. The choice to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep believing that tomorrow could be better than today. Celine made that choice with every step. And as she walked into the sunrise, she knew she'd keep making it, for as long as it took, for as long as she drew breath, because that's what survivors did. They survived. And then they built something beautiful from the wreckage. The mountain waited in the distance. Home now, instead of prison. Celine smiled. Then she and her wolves walked toward it together. Not as monsters, not as victims, just as wolves who'd learned that the strongest weapon wasn't claws or fangs or shadow magic. It was the refusal to let darkness have the final word.